Hello everyone, this is Tom Uren. I'm here with the Grugq for another Between Two Nerds. G'day Grugq, how are you?
G'day Tom, fine and yourself?
Oh well, this week's edition is brought to you by Run Zero, the active and passive network asset discovery tool. So I thought today that we'd take a look at the future of hacking. So there's
sort of Blade Runner, very
yeah. So it's that William Gibson. I think it's William Gibson quote that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. And so the place where I think we can see the future of hacking is actually in the cryptocurrency space. And in the time that I've been writing the newsletter, it's kind of progressed from, there was a flaw in the smart contract or the protocol, and we exploited that to steal hundreds of millions of dollars. And that went on for a year or two. And that seems to have disappeared. And so now in the last year or two, there's been hacks where we compromised 3 people and we got them to sign, a 3 of 5 multi-signature wallet. And so, real hacking. I think there was another one where we compromised someone through, was it a media server, Plex? I think that sounds familiar. And got onto a developer's machine and then took credentials and stole password wallets, and then we cracked the password wallets because that relied on an old version of the wallet where the encryption was less good, so you could just brute force them. There was another example where they fiddled with the user interface of a signature, and so that they tricked people into signing something where it was not clear that they were signing a bad transaction. So it feels like to me that space is where there's very highly motivated attackers who are spending a long time understanding the problem, getting grips around it, thinking of clever, I guess they're really sort of chaining together different loopholes or vulnerabilities or whatever.
I think the interesting thing here, in a way, is that the exploit chains that you're looking at are, we use an info stealer to get credentials, to log into a developer's machine, to install an application that allows us to monitor his login, which we can then use to gain access to his developer account, which we can then use to see how some other dependent services, like you get in the supply chain trust relationship from like the developer to the company that they work at, which is then trusted by another company, which does something, and you could then exploit that trust relationship to cash out from this, this other company. And it's as impressive as we wrote a virtual machine using like the font rendering engine of like Adobe PDF or whatever. Like, it's cool stuff. But here it's like entire systems that are getting chained together.
Yeah,
right?
and
that's the motivation level.
The specific hack we'll talk about is the drift protocol hack that happened, I think, a couple of weeks ago now.
Yeah, I think it was the April 1st.
That's right. So $280 million was stolen. Not a single
Well, 290
exploit.
now because of the value has gone up.
Not a single exploit was used, not a single 0-day. It seems to me that there's this progression from clever hacking to much more social engineering and, like you said, that trust-based relationships, supply chains, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And we've spoken a few times about AI, and none of this, what we're talking about, like AI, I don't think it's going to hurt it. It may even help because some of the social trust can be bolstered by well-generated assets.
A good lying machine, basically, that can print lies, right? Like, that would be very helpful. So at the same time, I feel one of the things is that these crypto shops keep falling for things which, I mean, they're individually might not be that complicated, or they might be very complicated, but ultimately the problems tend to be at the procedure level for how they operate, where it would be things like a developer machine is on the same network, or the guy uses the same laptop to develop as he does to manage, the pool of assets that they have. And so if somehow his developer machine gets compromised, then it's the same machine that has access to all of the funds, right? And that's just a compartmentation issue. So there are these like processes and procedures and ways of doing things that it seems to me would make this a lot harder.
One of the dynamics I was thinking about is that having worked in a high security environment, security was a pain. It was an impediment. But I always felt that it was worthwhile because it's drilled into you. There's this bigger picture. And very occasionally people would subvert security, but only because there was an operational need that we needed to get this thing done right now, and that following the proper procedures would take too long. And so you could get someone to sign off on that. Like there was actually a way that someone could just like signature away the security protocols. And it seems to me that the problem with cryptocurrency is that you've got, on the one hand, I really, really want to keep this secure because there's hundreds of millions of dollars at stake. But on the other hand, I really, really want to operate quickly because I could potentially have hundreds of millions of dollars if I can beat other people. Like it's a race for the riches.
Yeah.
And so there's it feels at least like there's a lot of stronger tension between always wanting good security, except in rare circumstances in the high security environment. Whereas in the cryptocurrency environment I always want good security, but I also always want to operate really quickly.
Except when it gets in the way of me doing things. Yeah. Right. Which is
which is all the time.
I want high security, but without the friction. Which is Yeah, I think I agree with you on that one because one of the books I read a long time ago was a sort of like counterintelligence in theory and practice, which I thought was going to be super exciting. But it's a manual for managers at places with a lot of security, like where you used to work. And so you could imagine how thrilling it is to read about, you need to make sure that your security guards are audited and background checked, and then, make sure that you follow all protocols when you get your fences installed. And but they got onto the more technical stuff. And one of the things that they listed was, your security procedures should be effective. They should do this, they should do that. And they need to have buy-in from your user base.
Right, yeah.
And at the time, I was like, since when do you need people to agree with you? Like, you just tell them they have to do it. Like, that's dumb. But now I realize actually that that's one of the, just how profoundly important that is as a requirement for good security. It's like you need the people who are actually doing all the stuff to believe that they should be following your procedures. Like they should agree, yes, this is the thing I need to do for reasons that I believe in.
Yeah. Right. So I think that you're old enough to realize that it matters what people want to do. So Drift, they've released this long, it's long for Twitter or X, postmortem. Their postmortem is obviously designed to paint themselves, as always, as whenever any organization gets hacked.
We were blindsided by these
very sophisticated
geniuses, right? Yeah.
So one of the very first headlines is an attack 6 months in the making. The preliminary investigation shows that Drift experienced a structured intelligence operation requiring organizational backing, significant resources, and months of deliberate preparation. So in or about fall 2025, Drift contributors were approached by a group of individuals at a major crypto conference who presented as a quantitative trading firm looking to integrate on the protocol. So this, I thought, when I read this, really reminded me of us talking about, what did you call it? The big hack? Where
the long con. Yeah.
The long con. Yep.
Yep.
And so they go on and they talk about how this group presented, like I said, as a firm, and then they developed trust over time, and then they were working together essentially.
Right. They were collaborating on this the shared integration thing, the group had these sophisticated threat actors.
I'll just jump ahead and jump in and say that they've been pegged as North Koreans, although the people in person, Drift says that they were not North Korean.
Nationals.
Does it say citizens or nationals?
Nationals, yeah. Here's the thing, is these guys did spend a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort, right? They invested money into Drift just to demonstrate that they were, real people.
Yep. They engaged multiple contributors through multiple working sessions, asked detailed and informed product questions, and deposited over $1 million of their own capital. So it turns out that if you're North Korea and you steal hundreds of millions of dollars, you've got one or two spare to set up new operations.
You're willing to do you can leverage 1 million to get 280 plus your initial investment back. I think, that must have been super risky, because if it didn't work out, I don't think the North Koreans are like, oh, well, you can't win all of them. Sometimes it costs $1 million and you don't get anything out of it.
In a way, it feels like to me that this was almost inevitable. Like once unless you do something to tip them off, and it seems like that in lots of cons, you can make mistakes and it's recoverable because you've spent so long building up trust that once and
people will convince themselves that it's a real thing, and to accept that they got conned in the middle of it is quite hard, because it's sort of like I'm an idiot. This is dumb. I'm being stupid. People don't really like to think that about themselves, right? They'd rather rationalize like, he probably meant something else when he said that. Or,
Yeah, you do hear stories of people who've been caught by the scam compounds, and their relatives try and convince them that it's a scam, and it's impossible. Like they just can't convince them. And I wonder if you're doing this kind of scam, you get to a point where you go, yeah, we've got it in the bag. It's just a matter of time.
Right. Yeah, so they used to call that when you have his con, like when you've got his confidence. And part of the way that you get that is by you subvert what people are looking for. People are looking for, like if someone comes up and says, lend me money, you're on guard. But if someone comes up and says, here, hold this $100 bill for me, I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Right. You don't see that as the big...
This is the situation, right? Yeah.
Right. It's, it seems very much like no one who is trying to trick me would start out by being trusting.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Like,
so it continues. Conversations continued through February and March 2026. Various Drift contributors met individuals from this group again face-to-face at multiple major industry conferences. So it seems like the people that they met were competent, could hold a good conversation. Like they must be good people.
My guess is what they would have done is they would have found one actor to be not the biz dev guy, but a sort of maybe like a CEO who could be a little bit clueless, who would then bring his technical team with him. Right. And so like you've hired the one actor to come and be like, an older gentleman with the graying hair and a sort of distinguished, someone who sort of just exudes trust. You shake hands with them and you could see that they've just been on vacation and had a manicure, and you're just like, all right, these people have money. And you speak with that guy and he's like, I'm not really I'm more of the investor in this thing, whatever. I've brought my technical team who are,
this is my excellent.
Quant. Right? Exactly. Like, let's have a drink and we'll let these guys hash it out together.
Yeah.
Right. To me, that would make a lot of sense. Like, you could probably hire someone to do that without much problem, because they wouldn't know. I mean, you could probably hire a struggling actor and convince them that they're auditioning for a role in a reality TV show.
It wouldn't be the first time that North Korea has hired people to carry out, they've used them to carry out assassinations, right?
Right. In Malaysia, they hired those two women to kill, to assassinate the step brother or half brother or younger brother, something like that. So it's entirely plausible that you'd hire someone to do something that you can't do yourself, and then have your people handle the rest of it. That's in line with what I would expect, and it would make sense. Like it'd be worth it for the cop. Dude, I got to tell you, the very first recorded confidence trick was in like 16 something in London, where there was a guy who was standing in a corner all dressed up as a gentleman, and he had a pocket watch, and like some other rich gentleman came by with a pocket watch. And this one guy goes, "That's a fine pocket watch. You should see mine." And the guy's like, "Yes, that's nice." He goes, "I will lend mine to you for 2 days. I will meet you back here in the corner and you can return it to me." And he lends him his pocket watch and comes back 2 days later. And the guy hands him his pocket watch. And the guy goes, "Now lend me your pocket watch and I'll meet you in 2 days." It doesn't come back. What was particularly funny was the article about it wrote how the guy kept going back to the corner like for days. Like, maybe I got the dates wrong. Maybe he's coming back now.
Well, I think that's an interesting example of like not believing that you've been conned, right?
Right.
And I mean, in this case, it's not until $280 million disappears that the Telegram chats that they were having also disappear. That's the giveaway. Otherwise, I actually suspect they would have gone,
"Oh, there's been a mistake."
Yeah, and I mean, they would have figured it out eventually, surely.
I'm sure, yeah, like if you had kept those Telegram channels up and just been like, "What? No, that's crazy. How did that happen?"
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wow, that's really bad.
What are you going to do to help us get back our $1 million?
There you go. Are you going to make us whole? We'll sue. Yeah, in a way, it feels like that's the missing piece almost. That because if these guys if they'd maintained the illusion and kept the confidence, they might have been able to go in for a second round. Like they might have been able to go back and do it again.
I mean, I think the thing about these sorts of things is that there's a forensic trail that is hard to totally eliminate.
Sure, but here's the thing. If you lay a false trail that is more convincing, right? If you can send a phishing email, right, and make it appear that this phishing email, like just do a legit phishing attack with a little bit of confidence building, a little bit of like, here's an attachment, whatever. It doesn't have to be the vector, but it is a plausible thing, particularly because if you have control of the box, you could execute the phishing malware yourself. So
in this particular case, they managed to compromise 2 signers of a multi-signature wallet, and there was 5 signers, and it appears that 2 out of 5 was enough.
Well, that's a clear majority if you think about it.
So
2 out of 5.
So there's a report on Cointelegraph where it's basically, a lawyer taking the other position that this was negligent, and that's one of the points they bring up. Like, at first glance, it's like, yeah, 2 of 5, that seems pretty stupid. On the other hand, I kind of think that it didn't matter. They were in such a position that they would have got... If
you've got 2, you've got 3.
Yeah, that's right. Like it was just a matter of time. It seems like they were operating...
Look, it wasn't like the hack didn't stop when they got 2 people because that was all they could get. It stopped because that was all that they needed.
Yeah.
Right. If they needed a third person, it would have continued until they got that third person. Right?
Yeah.
Like
so
it didn't get detected. It got executed. Right.
Yes.
So
yeah. So the mechanism is interesting in that it appears that one of the signature holders was compromised, I guess, by an Apple iOS test flight app. So test flight is the way, I guess it's like a beta app in a way. You create the app and it doesn't need to go through the app store. You can just distribute it. And the pretext in this case was, here's a wallet app that we've developed.
Right. So
try it out.
This is exactly what test flight is for. It's that if you're a developer and you're working on a product and you need people to test it for you and you need users, you don't want to have to go through the App Store process because... Yeah,
it's an Apple endorsed process.
Right. And you can only install 100 apps. You can only install to 100 users
right.
for one developer. So it's not an alternate deployment mechanism, right? It's very much a development thing. And that's exactly how they used it. They said, look, our developer is working on this app for this protocol or this company that we're integrating with your company. Here's a demo of what we're doing. That is literally what it should be used for, right?
Yeah. And I'm not sure that there was anything necessarily obviously malicious in the test flight app itself. Like it could have just done something that is potentially entirely benign. And then there was just one signature that was stolen that way, or one credential, or one person was compromised that way. And then another person, it seems like it was maybe a VS Code extension. To me, that says, well, we would have come up with a third excuse or pretense or reason for you to install something else. And it's not...
It would have been a browser extension if it wasn't a VS Code extension, and it would have been a desktop Mac OS app, or it would have been... It would be a mistake to get fixated on the specific techniques that they used, rather than the fact that they were so motivated that they developed these techniques for each person that they're going after.
Yeah, and so it is like this did take place over 6 months. So $1 million, probably 6 months worth of competent development work to get $285 million still seems like a fantastic deal.
Yeah. Like I don't think there's anyone who would turn that down as an investment opportunity, right? Like no one would be like, no, that's a bad ROI. So it reminds me of how when the Aurora hack by China against Google happened, and as I recall, it was like an attack against IE6, like Internet Explorer 6, which was the style at the time. Haroon Mir had a very interesting thing to say about that, which was, so at the time, a lot of people were saying like, oh, they shouldn't have been using IE. They should have been using Firefox or whatever. But his thing was like, look, they weren't hacked because they were using IE, right? They were hacked by IE because that's what they were using.
Right, yeah.
Right? Like that's the thing that was available, so that's what was going to be used to hack them. If they had been using Firefox, they would have been hacked via Firefox. If they were used by, if they're using Telnet and, Cat, there would have been some way of hacking them via a different channel, right? But the point wasn't that, if you hadn't done this, you wouldn't have been hacked. You just would have been hacked differently.
Yep.
I can't imagine that after 6 months and $1 million of capital investment, the North Koreans are sitting there going, he doesn't use VS Code. Now what do we do?
Yeah, that's right. So I have sympathy for both sides there. 205 doesn't seem enough, but also it seems that 5 of 5, it's better, but it wouldn't have been enough either, I think.
I don't know. I feel in a way that they could have, and this is me definitely armchair generaling the whole thing. Like,
yep.
I would simply have not fallen into an ambush. But it does feel like if there was more friction on the side of the signers, of the inside.
Right. Yeah. So isolation between signers and developers.
Right. If your development laptop gets hacked, it should not impact your ability to sign in any way because it wouldn't be related. You aren't using the same device. Like signatures should have to be done via some sort of physical action.
I like just the separation of signature hardware and credentials and laptops you actually work on or whatever. That seems like it would have worked in this case. I feel like the test flight app is a good example of where that would fail though, because the whole point was to put it was a wallet thing, right? And I guess where that would not fail is if the wallet did not have the authorization for the 285 million. It would be let's put a play amount of money in there.
Yeah, I find it hard to believe that They got a development wallet from a partner, and then they just transferred all of their funds into it just to see how it would work, give it a little bit of play.
Well, is it funds or is it keys? But anyway, yeah, it seems like a mistake to put that much trust. Like, let's have my Play wallet in there, or my Play credentials, or whatever it is.
Or even so much as like, here is a dedicated set of developer funds and whatever, and like, yes, we don't want someone to steal our $10,000 developer slush fund or whatever it is. But you really don't want someone to steal your $280 million.
That's right.
So you can absolutely afford to set up here's some test money that you can play with.
Right. Like, so we're sort of landing on still possibly incompetent, allegedly, but not for the reasons the lawyer thinks.
Right. It's. I think if they added more friction, it would have been possible to prevent a remote compromise of this sort. Like if you would have had to be physically there to touch keys at approximately the right time.
Well, I think there was that other hack, right, where there was some sort of hardware authentication where they had to agree, but the user interface was so bad
it was
that you couldn't
web
tell.
Browser as well, which is what they hacked, like a browser extension, which is.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So I think there was a hardware component that told the truth, but because the user interface was so obscure,
bad,
I guess it was.
And, it was difficult to read and it was compromised, and so.
And the easy to read interface was compromised, so it looked like everything was legit, and so off you go.
Yeah, it's very hard to tell in a way whether the North Koreans are operating at sort of like the maximum edge of their competence when they're doing these. And therefore, if you just added that little bit more friction, it would have been too much for them to overcome. And this is sort of where I come down on it, is that I suspect that if they added more friction, it would have made the operation take longer, but it wouldn't have made it not successful.
Right.
It would have taken more than 6 months, but it still would have succeeded in the end. They would have just had to do more trickery of some sort to get to that stage.
Yep. So sometimes I think these stories are kind of optimistic stories in that they show that attackers are having to work harder, try different tricks. I'm a naive optimist, and that this means that security is actually improving. You're not convinced. Because the other thought I had is that this is just North Korea planning for the future. Let's try out this style of operation because, maybe one day there'll be
maybe really Mythos is going to kill all the bugs and we'll never be able to hack again, and we'll just have to send people in directly and use test flight and, dodgy browser extensions and all that. It feels to me very much like North Korea is doing the sort of nation-state level hacking you'd expect from NSA or ASD or the GCHQ or Avid or any, like they're doing that, but they're doing it against civilians for money rather than against governments for secrets. And I don't know that there's a sort of like train hard and defeat a tiger. Like there's no amount of kung fu training that will make you better than a tiger, right? Like in this way, like is there any amount of like civilian grade security stuff that you could do that will stop NSA that you can maintain for years?
I was thinking about this in terms of what you're really asking people to do in this case was it was the equivalent of an insider threat, effectively. Mm-hmm. But it was an insider threat where they managed to compromise 2 different people. And so I think there's many organizations that can deal with one malicious insider. Mm-hmm. I think 2 working together actually becomes quite hard. But from an intelligence community perspective, the way they deal with that kind of threat is that before you truly get trusted, there's months and months of vetting where they talk to all sorts of people who know you from your past.
Right.
And that's just not practical for a normal business or even a cryptocurrency business, right? Despite there being huge amounts of money at stake.
Well, yeah, even terrorist organizations have that sort of vetting that they go through. So, for example, with the old the communists, like the Red Brigades and stuff, before you could sort of get into the action groups, you spent months and months and months discussing communist theory, reading communist books, doing self-criticism sessions, just the sort of thing that you would have to be insane to want to do. Like, it's just like you need to be dedicated to sit through all this, like to read all of these things, discuss them for hours and hours and hours, day after day after day. And then, just no one wants to sit through that and come out, like you can't do that and come out the other end without being absolutely committed to the cause. Like, it's just, which is why no one who penetrates a adversary intelligence organization does it by sending someone in through the front door. They recruit people already inside. Like, you wait until all that's over and then you
tried.
get someone.
They tried with, what's his name?
Like, when I say no one, I don't mean that it never happens. What I mean is it's just like that is not the easy route. Like, that is not the high success route. You're optimistic about the end state, that the sort of hoops that the North Koreans have to jump through suggests that it's getting harder and harder, and therefore it will be easier and easier to be secure as long as you're not facing the North Koreans as an adversary, right? As long as someone doesn't have that level of motivation.
I mean, I like to believe that, but when you say it, it does sound a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, but see, where I'm optimistic is it shows that the sort of like the doom saying about mythos and AI, cybersecurity is sort of the end of everything. To me, regardless of what those things do for memory corruption or logic bugs or whatever, that doesn't actually impact security, because security is things like someone coming up to you at a conference and spending 6 months gaining trust and then having you install, a browser extension or a VS Code extension or a test flight app or whatever, right? Like, none of that would be mitigated by some sort of mythical AI capability. Like, that's not going to save you at any step along the way there. So yeah, I don't know if I'm optimistic about security, but I'm optimistic about cybersecurity overall.
So you're optimistic that the podcast can continue.
Our job is going nowhere.
Thanks a lot.
Wait, that's not the right way to put it. Sorry. Our job is not going anywhere.
I mean, thanks for nothing, Grugq.
Thanks a lot, Tom.